Comey not respecting the court is late. Mike Davis, the Viceroy, joins us. Mike, when you first started coming on the show right before the Mar-a-Lago raid and started walking us through this, we both envisioned this day coming, but it's been quite a journey, has it not, sir?
Yeah, I mean, remember what James Comey did here. He used the FBI, he politicized it and weaponized it to help Hillary Clinton's campaign and to cover up her corruption and to hurt President Trump. And they spied on presidential candidate Donald Trump. They spied on his presidency. They hobbled his first term with the bogus Russian collusion hoax Crossfire Hurricane investigation, the biggest scandal in American history. And I would say to former FBI Director James Comey, this first indictment is just the beginning of justice you will face. This first indictment is related to James Comey's lying to Congress, to the Senate Judiciary Committee, to then Chairman Chuck Grassley in 2017, when my former boss asked James Comey about his leaks to the media about this matter. He lied about it. He lied about it again in 2020. He reaffirmed his lying to Congress in 2020. This was both a lie under 18 U.S.C. 1001, false statements under 18 U.S.C. 1001, and it's also obstruction of a congressional investigation, because when you lie to investigators, you obstruct their investigation. We're not going to see Comey charged from the 2017 lie because that's beyond the 5-year statute of limitations, but the 2020 lie got charged by Trump U.S. Attorney Lindsey Halligan within the 5-year period. Remember what happened with this grand jury. This grand jury is a bunch of Democrats, including government workers in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., and Alexandria, Virginia, in this woke, white, wealthy enclave outside of Washington, D.C. It seems from the news reports that the grand jury actually considered this seriously, because the grand jury apparently did not return true bills on perjury, but the grand jury did return true bills on the indictment for false statements and obstruction. So the grand jury took these false statements and this obstruction seriously. These alleged false statements and obstruction by James Comey. They took it so seriously that they charged him with these federal crimes, and now James Comey is going to show up for his arraignment today in the federal court in the Eastern District of Virginia. He's already pled not guilty. The judge is going to explain to him the rules of the road. He's very familiar with the rules of the road. He was the head of the FBI. He was a prosecutor before. He has Patrick Fitzgerald, his buddy, who was another deep state actor, as his defense attorney. And so I'm excited to see what old James Comey has to say. He's awfully sanctimonious, and he's told us before that even small lies need to be prosecuted because it's so damaging to the system. Again, this is just the beginning of justice for James Comey. He participated in the biggest scandal in American history when he politicized and weaponized law enforcement and intel agencies with Crossfire Hurricane to take out presidential candidate Trump, to help Hillary, to cover up her foreign corruption. And when they failed and Trump went into the White House, they hobbled his presidency. They impeached him twice. They went after his top aides like you, Steve Bannon. They put Peter Navarro and you in prison. They tried to put Trump in prison 4 times for non-crimes. They tried to bankrupt him for non-fraud. They tried to take him off the ballot in several states unconstitutionally. The Democrats even tried to take off Trump's head twice when Biden said Trump was the gravest threat to democracy, compared him to Hitler, said to put a bullseye on him, on Trump, and then underfunded his Secret Service protection twice. So I want to emphasize this. Today is the beginning of justice, certainly not the end.
Folks, this is the beginning. And look, there's so much going on behind the scenes here in the last couple of months, but this is the first step in the formal process that is going to take years. So get ready, and you're going to know all the details. We're going to give you all the inside baseball. Mike, just hang on. The Viceroy's with us. Just hang on for 1 second. I want to go to the Viceroy again. Mike, since for Grassley, you work with him for years. You know House Judiciary. You saw it yesterday, or Senate Judiciary. I thought it was a travesty. I thought the personal attacks of Pam Bondi were way outside the bounds. And I think it goes to show you, because it's a first step of a journey for them. They are literally going to go after everybody in the Justice Department viciously. And this is the first step in a long legal journey we've got. But you've already got, it's all you kind of weighed against us because we're not in D.C., which is impossible to get anything regarding justice against the deep state. But even Northern Virginia, you just mentioned, Northern Virginia, you cross the Potomac now. And my beloved native state is literally Washington, D.C., all the way to Fredericksburg. So you're just in a suburb of Washington, D.C. with all federal workers. And that's who's essentially are people that's livelihoods are tied to expanding government, right, with services, consultants, et cetera. So it's very tough to get a fair jury here, very tough to get a fair trial. But talk to us about this journey.
Well, look, I want to step back and say this is why I have been so strongly praising Pam all along. And I understand that, with any appointed official, they can disappoint from time to time. But what's so key about Pam is that she is fiercely loyal to President Trump. She lives outside of the swamp. She's from deep red Florida and not Washington, D.C. She doesn't care about the swamp. She doesn't want to become part of the swamp. She's not a lifer in the swamp, and she is tough as hell, as we just saw at that Senate Judiciary Committee hearing. If you got some Ivy League white dude as the Attorney General, some dork as the Attorney General, that Attorney General would have been up there apologizing and begging for forgiveness from those partisan Democrat senators. Pam Bondi stood her ground and punched back very forcefully. She is a force to be reckoned with. We are seeing this right now with James Comey. I don't think Bill Barr would have had the balls to do what Pam Bondi is doing today by moving forward with this indictment, just under the 5-year statute of limitations to go after James Comey. I don't think Pam Bondi would have allowed the U.S. attorney in the Southern District of Florida, Jason Redding Quinones, my good friend, to have the court open up a new special grand jury in Fort Pierce, Florida, the same Fort Pierce where Jack Smith tried to throw President Trump in prison for the rest of his life for espionage for presidential records that President Trump was allowed to have under the Presidential Records Act. So maybe, just maybe, they're actually going to move forward with what we've been discussing on your show for 3 years, Steve, which is the conspiracy against rights. When these lawfare Democrats use the FBI, the intel agencies, and politicize them and weaponize them to go after Trump, his top aides, and his supporters, that seems like a conspiracy against rights under 18 U.S.C. Section 241. Jack Smith and the lawfare Democrats are very familiar with that charge. It's one of the charges they brought against President Trump. And I imagine that between Pam Bondi having balls of steel and Jason Redding Quinones coming from a family of Cuban refugees, a family that despises the weaponization of government, and it's to their core they despise that. I imagine, I bet you anything that justice is coming.
I want to drill down on this for a second, because all the information we know about Comey and the act itself happened. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think the actual incident, that it happened during Barr's watch, right, or before Barr, during Barr's, when Barr had every ability, and for many other things, to start this. But of course he wasn't going to do it. I mean, they actually worked counter to President Trump. It took President Trump actually coming back in those years in the wilderness, Mike, of which you became, the viceroy became a major part of the team. You had worked for Grassley before. Then you started the Article 3 project. I got to tell you, without the Article 3 project and your ability to articulate these complicated issues, I'm not sure we get here today. I think that's the importance of what you as the viceroy has done. I want to go and talk about this Fort Pierce for a second, because I've been advocating, and you've been saying, hey, we don't want to do that because it's going to slow things down. And I finally had Josh Hawley yesterday because of the wiretapping of the senators about just selecting somebody to be a special prosecutor here and take the whole case. Now, talk to us about what's going, because if we do it in Washington or even Northern Virginia, this thing is not going to get the traction we want because of the prejudice of the jury pool and the judges. So talk to us about what's happening in Fort Pierce, and can that be where this expanded conspiracy case actually lands?
Just to be clear, I have very publicly called for this for the last 3 years. In my 5,000 media hits, where you have turned me into the biggest media whore in Trump world. But I would say this, that I have very publicly called
That's saying something. That's saying something. Go ahead.
I have very publicly called for the Trump, when Trump wins re-election, and everyone said that was impossible, and then it was Steve Bannon and me and the War Room posse fighting every day. President Trump's back in the White House, and justice is coming. We have been calling for this every day for the last 3 years, with, again, over 5,000 media hits, constant opinion pieces, constant social media, constant meetings with senators and members of the House, constant meetings with the coalition. We have built this political case. John Sauer and Todd Blanche and Amel Bove, the new judge on the Third Circuit, and the rest of, and Boris Epstein and the rest of President Trump's team, Pam Bondi when she was on the impeachment team, President Trump's legal team, have made the correct legal arguments with presidential immunity. We provided all the support they needed with the political arguments to help the 6 Republican appointed justices find and keep their backbones, because as conservatives, we not only have to get the law right, we have to have the politics right, so our side doesn't go wobbly. They did that. President Trump is back in the White House. Pam Bondi's running the Justice Department. I pushed very forcefully to get Jason Redding Quinones picked very early on as the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida. The Democrats obstructed his confirmation for many months. He finally got confirmed. You just saw, it's very public, that the court granted his motion to set up a special grand jury in Fort Pierce. Those grand juries take time, so the grand jury should be up and running by January, because you have to send out the notices and you have to do all the process that's required to set up special grand juries. And then those special grand juries go for 18 months. So I would say that January seems like the time that the grand jury in Fort Pierce could start hearing a conspiracy against rights case. Who knows? Maybe they're already starting to do investigations right now before the grand jury is fully impaneled in January. So you have a case that's building, so you can take it to the grand jury. But look, again, I have very publicly called for this, that all of these lawfare Democrats who participated in this ongoing criminal conspiracy to take out President Trump, his top aides, his allies, his supporters, even parents, Christians, when you politicize and weaponize intel agencies and law enforcement to go after your political enemies, that is the biggest scandal imaginable. That is the biggest criminal conspiracy imaginable. And these lawfare Democrats better lawyer up, because, again, nobody's above the law, as James Comey told us constantly. And I'm going to make damn sure over the next 4 years that these people face justice.
Viceroy, hang on for 1 second. I want to go to Brian Glenn. It looks like there's a little activity. We're going to come back to Mike Davis with more analysis on this. Folks, this is the a signpost on the journey we've been taking together about making sure we can save this constitutional republic. It started in the on J6. What they said turned into an insurrection was as farthest from the truth. Now we know there are 274 FBI agents outside. So much is just becoming clear now. Yesterday, you just found out because of a whistleblower, not because we have control of the FBI. And let's go to Brian Glenn right now. Brian, it looks like people are moving forward. They're not going to come to the podium. They're going to go across. Is that what's happening?
That's what it looks like. I just walked over to where the main reporters are to try to find out exactly what the timing of everything and what's happening. We've seen a lot of, reporters that have been inside the courtroom run out to each corresponding tent to kind of give their reports of what is happening. But yeah, it looks like the group has moved across the street just waiting for some type of appearance. And I was told earlier that they did not see Comey come into the courthouse, so he has not been seen as of yet outside the area that we're at. Now, I can't confirm that he's going to come out and make a statement, or his attorney, or someone with all of this in the legal team. But I will
hang on. I'm gonna give you some inside baseball. There are entrances, Mike Davis. There are entrances that you can bring people in. They were very specific when I was arraigned and Peter Navarro arraigned that we had to walk. They wanted us to walk in front of this, in front of the lynch mob of the media. I think I gave as good as I got. But they absolutely ruled out any ability to come into this courthouse undercover. Do you think that they've actually waived the rules for Comey so Comey can slip in here like the rat he is instead of having to face at least some of the media like Real America's Voice that may pop a uncomfortable question, sir?
It's a very good question, Steve. When I was a brand new prosecutor almost 20 years ago, I worked in that courthouse in the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia. It would be pretty unusual to give a preferential treatment or special treatment to a defendant like James Comey simply because he's the favorite of the deep state. But maybe there are security reasons. I'm not sure what the thought process would be. They certainly didn't care about, perp walking you or Jeff Clark or, pulling you guys out of your homes. And Peter Navarro, Jeff Clark, they pulled out of his home in his underwear. Peter Navarro, they perp walked. They didn't have any problem putting Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro in prison for 6 months for constitutional executive privilege going back 250 years to George Washington. But who knows? Maybe this Democrat judge who is on this case?
No. I'm gonna find out all of it because I'll be blunt. Is that when I showed up to the federal court for a misdemeanor, I turned myself into the FBI on the date, and I was arraigned later. I was shackled for a misdemeanor. I was shackled, put in a van, taken over to the federal courthouse from the FBI, and basically put in one of those holding cells below federal thing. And it's a holding cell that is, you have no access to anything for hours, shackled, without seeing your attorney. Oh, these guys tried to play Smash Bros. They were trying to break you. In fact, at the time, I was thinking, I can go through this and we're going to be fine. I give 2 Fs, right? But I was thinking there are a couple of 3 guys I know that may get rolled up in this thing. I don't think they're going to handle this. It's psychologically, they try to break you from the very beginning. And if Comey doesn't have this, I'll clearly check in with the DOJ and FBI and find out why he's getting special treatment. He should get the exact change because his are felonies. Let me go back. Peter Navarro and Stephen K. Bannon were misdemeanors for not complying with Congress, which is, as you know, Mike, 99% of the time are handled civilly. I think for the first time since the McCarthy era, and I think there's only one guy. Ring Lardner Jr., who there's another shot of outside the courthouse. Ring Lardner Jr., who actually served in Danbury. It's the reason I requested Danbury prison when they said they were going to put me in a prison, not in a camp. That Ring Lardner Jr. actually for failing to testify. Back then it was actually a felony. That's why he went to Danbury. The people at Danbury told me they don't ever remember a misdemeanor being in a federal low security prison. We got to make sure. I will promise the audience I'm going to find out why Comey's not. His are felonies. I mean, he's got for 2 felonies, and this is just the appetizer. There's so much more coming. Do you think they try to cut a deal? Well, look, this courthouse, the judges, everybody associated with this are a bunch of flaming progressives. Northern Virginia, like I said, it's not Virginia anymore. Virginia ends at Fredericksburg. Basically everything north of there, and you still got Spotsylvania, some good folks there, but basically everything north of there is just a suburb of Washington, D.C., and infected with the administrative state mindset. But, Mike, do you think that because the other thing I was told, and just to show respect to the court, when they say 10 o'clock The judge wants you there at 10 o'clock. They don't want you there at 2 after 10. They don't want you at 5 after 10. So my vehicle with my security guys, we'd always show up a couple minutes early just to show respect for the court. I mean, I don't know why. I thought it was supposed to be arraigned at 10 if I had the schedule correctly. I don't know why we're running late here.
Well, I would say this to James Comey,
Sure.
that you might get this VIP treatment in the Eastern District of Virginia, but I doubt you're going to get this VIP treatment in the Fort Pierce Division in the Southern District of Florida. So right now he's getting the Four Seasons. He's going to get the Motel 6 in Fort Pierce. And look, and I would also say this, Steve, when the next Democrat administration throws me in the gulag, throws me in Danbury, I want, as someone who's has not exactly been the most healthy person in Washington D.C. over the last.
Hang on. I got breaking news. They slipped Comey in through another entrance so he didn't have to come through here. This is bullshit. I don't know who at DOJ and who at the FBI, I hope the White House understands this, that, instead of Navarro and I proudly walked in there because I was proud of what I did. And I wasn't going to have the media. Mike Davis, you know this. You're one of the guys that backed me, one of my lawyers. I was proud. I don't mind backing down the media, but they try to sit there and psychologically break you. So they got that image of you walking into court the entire time. I don't know how James Comey's in court right now. He just pleaded not guilty. Is that correct? On social media? They allowed Comey to do something they didn't allow anybody else to do. This is the problem. The problem is the system is rigged on these guys' side, okay? It's got to stop. Is Comey going to be shackled? Is Comey going to be strip searched? Why? Comey's there for felonies. Navarro and Bannon, hey, look, I never whined about this at all. It is what it is. And when I went to prison, the audience knows that. It is what it is. But I'll be damned if we're going to sit here and allow Comey, who is a total scumbag, and you already see this deck is already, they've already stacked this deck right now. Why is Comey not coming in from outside like everybody has to? There's no way of taking you below thing. And I don't want to hear security. You don't think there was higher security at taking out Steve Bannon or Peter Navarro, right, than James Comey? Mike Davis, how could we have allowed this to happen? Comey's in court right now. I think he just pled not guilty.
Yeah, that's a good question. I just pinged a bunch of people at the DOJ, top people at the DOJ, and I'll try to find out why this happened.
The DOJ runs this deal. If anybody at the DOJ said that was fine, that is not good with the Warren Posse. It's not good with MAGA. We want Comey to get the exact same treatment. Look at President Trump. Did they give President Trump? Remember the circus? You had Rachel Maddow, and they had the deck chairs like they're directors. You think they were shooting Apocalypse Now, right? You had 9 directors' chairs. They're sitting up there drinking espressos, cappuccinos, opining about President Trump. They took his mugshot, everything like that. President Trump didn't get any favors. Nobody around President Trump. Hell, Tom Barrack. Tom Barrack's in the Middle East right now as ambassador to Turkey and a special envoy to the Levant. They dragged him out to Riverside and threw him in a federal jail for 14 days before he even dealt with him in one of the roughest jails out there in general population. What they did is go out of their way to try to break the Trump people, and they're already giving a special deal to Comey. I don't understand this, Mike. I thought this was also – and Comey's there for 2 felonies. This is what's so outrageous about it. We were there for essentially a civil charge like an advanced form of jaywalking, right? We had to go through the whole thing and the cost of it, the cost of security, the cost of the lawyers, and have the media try to be little pricks like they always are. Not that I mattered. Not that it mattered to me. I think I gave better than I got, but it's about the process and about how it's done. Mike Davis, the Viceroy, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm with you, Steve. If they gave special treatment to James Comey, they're already off to a very bad start on this case. They need to treat James Comey.
But they gave bad treatment. The media's all out there today told, hey, he's rolling up here. There's going to be a podium, and he slips in like the rat he is under the cover of darkness, right? I'm sure they're going to say, Mike, it's security concern. Hell with that. You don't think it was a bigger security concern for Steve Bannon in D.C.? Remember, I was in the heart of the district. And until Trump sent the troops, a very unsafe place, was it not, sir? You can see, I'm telling you, this is what we're trying to take apart. The deep state works in unison. Mike Davis has taught us this lesson over the years, and now you're seeing it here again, right? Of how the deck is stacked because the way the apparatus works right below the surface. Right below the surface, where the court, with the federal marshal, with the U.S. Marshals, with the with the people that actually run the day-to-day of the courts, with the FBI, because the FBI, as you know, they know everybody. This is one of the biggest courts they work out of, is it not, sir?
Yeah, this is a big one. This is the Eastern District of Virginia. It covers the CIA, it covers the Pentagon, it covers the suburbs of Washington, D.C. in Alexandria, Virginia, which used to be part of D.C. You're making very good points, Steve. If they're letting James Comey slither out of this courthouse and not face this, it's very interesting. It's a very, very interesting
and not face.
Very interesting approach.
I tell you, someone who's not going to be digging this, I'm just making a random observation. I think that is the guy that we continue because Article 3 has taught us this about the Article 2 powers. The individual that has in the proper interpretation of the Article 2 powers, the chief law enforcement officer and chief magistrate of this constitutional republic, I am sure he is not going to be digging this, okay? Just not. Comey should be treated just like Navarre and just like Bannon. I'm not asking for any worse treatment for Comey. He should be shackled, strip searched. Hey, like I said, it was what it was. If that's the process, let's just do the process. No whining, there's no tears in the war room, right? But no, to have a scumbag like this, and Comey's a little frail. You know, he comes out with the Taylor Swift thing. He goes to Taylor Swift concerts. He knows all the songs by heart. I mean, come on, man. He's a grown-ass man. What are you doing? He's kind of a weird guy, right? Not just sanctimonious, but there's something... I don't know. I don't want to get crude, but it's just something about this guy that let me say this. He's not going to handle being in a cell block in a federal prison for a long period of time. That's not going to turn out well for him. He's just, the cut of his jib is just not right. But Mike Davis, this is the way the deep state works. It's this interlocking connectivity of intelligence and law enforcement and the judiciary, sir.
Yeah, and this right here is precisely why I have very publicly called for the special grand jury in Fort Pierce, Florida, where you have a grand jury of real Americans in real America. You have outstanding federal judges like Judge Eileen Cannon, who calls balls and strikes and treats defendants equally. You don't have special treatment down in Fort Pierce, Florida, because a judge wouldn't allow special treatment. So this was a misstep. If the Trump Justice Department allowed James Comey to avoid public scrutiny like any other defendant, this was a misstep.
Yeah. This is, by the way, when they said, hey, you got to walk through, and they had a mob outside with no crowd control. They had a mob outside where I turned myself in to the FBI, and then they had a huge mob in media outside, both of them. I said, if that's the process, that's the process. Let's roll. Let's just go. It's game day. Let's hit it, right? But here, Comey, you already see special treatment. They slid him in through one of these sally ports or through one of these underground parking decks to get him in with no media scrutiny. So there wouldn't be that image of Comey forever walking into federal court, being the first FBI director, the real FBI director. The acting director, Gray, if memory serves me correctly, during Watergate, I think Patrick Gray, who had been acting FBI director, was actually indicted. Those charges were dropped later. But Comey is the first full-time FBI director to ever be indicted. And that photo of him going into the court would live in infamy for him. And that's why they avoided it. And somebody must have signed off on it. And this is okay with Pam and the folks and every, we have a very, I keep saying this all the time. We have a very tenuous grasp on the Justice Department. We have no grasp on the judiciary. We have a very tenuous grasp on the Justice Department and even less on the FBI. FBI, we got two guys over there. This is why I keep saying not just about they should have a recess, so recess appointments, President Trump can get his whole team over there. But you have to be going in this thing and blowing out like everybody. If this was signed off by justice, everybody associated with this, I don't know, to me should be at 5 o'clock today, boom, you're gone. Right? And particularly if they didn't let the high command up the chain of command know exactly what they were cooking up. Because what they wanted to avoid, and they're going to be laughing, hey, the Trump guys, we pulled one off them. They don't want a historic photograph. This is why we start the show. I didn't even do a cold open. I didn't even do my long open. Right? Why? I wanted the camera to go right there. It's going to be historic. At 10 o'clock, he's going to show up. Boom. You're going to have a historic figure of the first FBI director ever indicted on felony charges, right? And you're going to see this historic thing, and that'll be there forever. This is the equivalent of Hillary Clinton in the Benghazi hearings. You remember, they had her take Trey Gowdy, the goofball, allowed her to take the oath because she had to be sworn. It was sworn testimony. She didn't do it in front of the cameras. Because I was running Breitbart at the time, I said, hey, we're going to have a historic thing. Hillary Clinton being sworn in front of the world on all about her lies and misrepresentation about Benghazi. It didn't happen. I said, what happened? They negotiated to have her swear in before she walked out and took a seat at the table. This is what they do because this is all negotiated. Your surrender and your arraignment is kind of negotiated before the lawyers. Now, there's a process, and of course, Navarro and Bannon are going to be retail. Right? Here, you're getting a wholesale deal, Mike Davis, and this is just not acceptable. We needed that photograph today. This is why, folks, when I say it's the first step now in the official journey, because I've been working for years on this, and you see Mike Davis all over it, every day is going to be a struggle. Every day is going to be a struggle. Let me go back. This is why I say Boris Epstein is one of the great heroes in this country. Why? He put the team together. As you remember, Mike, it wasn't easy fielding a team. Right? To get the team Boris put together, he had to work. In 21, it was very hard to put together a team, given that they were trying to destroy Trump. Even Rupert Murdoch sent that email out to the Fox senior executives. We're going to make him a non-person. Well, he became a non-person, as Eric Trump told us yesterday, in the business community, in the commercial community, in the finance community. And that means big law firms are not going to retain you. I know this because some of my lawyers all worked at big firms that came back to me and said, hey, we love you, but our corporate clients are going to quit because you're Trump's guy, and we ain't represent anybody associated with President Trump. So this is negotiated, and here's my point, is that somehow somebody in a position of authority, either with the court, with the judge, with DOJ, with the FBI, bent the knee to Comey and allow Comey to slip in here like the snake he is, like the vermin he is, like the rat he is, to slip in here and not have to face the cameras. Now, he's going to walk out and go to the podium and, pontificate, I'm sure, if he does that. Otherwise, we'll slip out of here. But this is a major screw-up already, sir.
I would say this. James Comey helps lead the biggest scandal in American history. He helps politicize and weaponize law enforcement and intel agencies to take out a leading presidential candidate to help the other. And then when they failed, they tried to take out a president of the United States. And then when he left office with the evidence that they did this, they tried to destroy him and throw him in prison and bankrupt him and throw him off the ballot, right? So this is the biggest scandal in American history. This indictment of James Comey is the beginning and not the end of justice for James Comey. I'm going to push very forcefully, like I have for 3 years, for another indictment down in the Southern District of Florida for conspiracy against rights. But I would say this, I agree with you, Steve, that if anyone on the planet should have been perp walked and faced the humiliation, the shame, like every other criminal defendant does, it should have been James Comey. This is I defend everything in Trump world. I can't defend this one.
This is I was proud to go in. There was a misdemeanor. First off, number two, all of those rats on the committee and the staff all crawled on their belly over to the White House in the closing days of Biden's illegitimate regime and got an auto pen pardon. They knew they were criminals. They knew they criminalized that committee to come after it. They had criminal activity. Otherwise, why did the staff, by the way, the chief of staff over there perjured herself, the chief counsel perjured herself in my trial, right? Bald-faced lied about the whole process. A bald-faced lie. We knew it was a bald-faced lie. Of course, the Trump-appointed judge, when that is getting the information in, that's a tale for another day. But my point is, they knew that they were breaking the law and coming after us, criminalizing it, because later they crawled on their belly, not just Cheney in that crowd and Shifty Schiff that all got auto pen pardons and Liz Cheney, but the staff got pardons. And we had to face it. I was proud to go outside there, but I will tell you, it's quite intimidating. It's meant to be intimidating. It's meant to break you. You've got the world's media out there, and they're not there to help you, okay? Now, today, for some reason, and we'll get to the bottom of that reason, but I can guarantee you the chief magistrate and chief law enforcement officer of the United States, I don't think was in the loop on this. And clearly, the media was not in the loop on this. Our own Brian Glenn. In fact, is Brian still down there?
Not right now.
Okay. Where did he go?
Hey, Steve.
He's getting somewhere.
Okay.
Hey,
fine.
Steve.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
I have the answer.
Yes.
It was there was a summons issued instead of an arrest warrant. I think that was an oversight, and so they couldn't have him. They could not have Comey surrender with the FBI when there was a summons instead of an arrest warrant. I think it was an administrative mistake and it was not intentional.
But even unintentional is not that. That is.
I hear
not-
you, man.
Okay,
I
that's
hear
not
you,
the way
brother.
we want to start.
I
this.
hear you, brother.
That's-
I hear you, brother.
No,
But
and I'm not
when-
blaming. Listen, I'm not blaming people over there because look, they're swamped. The Senate Democrats, and this is why. And Mike, I had you on back in August. With Thune, and even JD's president of the Senate, we should have gone to a real recess, right? A real recess, and President Trump should then, because Mike Johnson said, I'll do it as Speaker, not a problem. The Senate refused to do it. John Thune refused to do it. Why did they refuse to do it, to go into real recess? They don't trust Trump. One of the biggest aspects, I keep saying that the Republican Party and the players here are just, they see Trump as a passing summer storm. They're just waiting to tap him along until he's gone, and then they go back to, Ted Cruz already, the Daily Telegraph already had a big story about how Ted Cruz is already gearing up for 2028. They all want to go back to the norm, okay? By not having those recess appointments, Mike, you know how under the gun and how overworked these folks are. You also know in the Eastern District of Virginia what we had to do there to make sure you actually had some people on the case. But this is the kind of technical thing that happens that the deep state knows. Don't get me wrong. I think obviously somebody knew the difference between a restaurant, because I had to show up at the FBI, turn myself in, go through the whole FBI process. Then they took me over to a federal court, shackled, I might add, to be arraigned in front of at that time a magistrate judge, not the actual judge over my trial. So this was a technical issue, but.
Let me say this,
go
Steve.
ahead.
So
jump in.
Lindsey
You're the lawyer.
Halligan
I just play one on. On War Room. Go ahead, sir.
Let me come to Lindsey Halligan's defense here, because she's a good American patriot.
Okay.
She's been Trump.
By the way,
Lindsey
I'm
Halligan-
not. Hang on. You're my lawyer. I'm not trying to go after Lindsey. I think she's a superstar for jumping in here at the last second and getting this done. Because talk to people about the time limit we had here. We were under the gun. People were just prepared. Yeah. Oh yeah, well, it ran out and you couldn't do it. We had that Tuesday, the ticking clock. Lindsey Halligan is a hero to me, right? For stepping in here and taking the responsibility. Go ahead, sir.
So before we dump on this more, I would just say this: Lindsey Halligan got sent to be the U.S. attorney, and she got zero help in this deep state office. She had to run this indictment and get it filed under the 5-year statute of limitations. Like you said, she was under the gun and she got zero help to do this. And she had a grand jury that was resisting her on perjury. You had a grand jury that went along with false statements and a grand jury that went along with obstruction of a congressional investigation. But this is a huge office, right? This is an important office in the Eastern District of Virginia. And you can't have, there's not one assistant U.S. attorney. It's not the U.S. attorney's job to do this, right? The U.S. attorney is more of the political
Right,
head of the
yes,
office. They're the
yes.
people who go run for
Yes.
Senates after they're the U.S. attorney. They're not the people who are actually in court. They're not the people who are actually in the grand jury.
But hang on,
Lindsay,
looking at the paperwork, this is where the bailiff and the U.S. Marshals. This is my point. The deep state is always going to protect their own. We're to these people alien invaders. Okay, that's they control the apparatus. They control the system. This is what I kept saying. The interlocking nature of the courts, of the bailiffs, of all the people that actually run the administration of the courts, in the court itself, the paperwork behind the scene, the FBI, they work with these people every day. Like you said, Langley is in this district. The Pentagon is in this district, right? Pentagon City and all the contractors. So this district is, I think that if you got Southern District of New York and D.C. as the two most important, I think even this Northern Virginia and this federal courthouse, to me, is as important as more important than like L.A. or Chicago. Hey, Mike, can you hang on a second? We are going to take a break. Hey, Mike Davis, walk me through why does he have a summons versus after surrender to the FBI?
That's a good question. I think it was just an administrative mistake. When you're sent into a U.S. attorney's office and your first day on the job, you're trying to single-handedly figure out where your office is and where the bathroom is, and then you have to indict the former FBI director because no one else in the building will help you. I'll give Lindsay a pass on this one.
But I know, no, I'll give him a pass. But here's my point: this stuff is very choreographed, right? In the process, what I'm saying, like even whatever you have, the night before, everybody's lawyers talk. Like for instance, we know exactly what was going to happen, although they did change it up radically behind the scenes and lied about what they were going to do to make it worse for me. But I didn't care. I knew this was going to be. Once you turn yourself in, they basically can do with you what they want, right? But the difference between what is a summons versus saying you're going to come in and turn yourself in to be arrested? Can you just tell the audience what the difference is? Yeah,
summons is you're going to show up. They just send you a summons, and on your own personal recognizance, you're going to show up to court. Like that's how many defendants operate, particularly with misdemeanors, unless you're Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro, then they send the SWAT team. But with an arrest warrant, that's where the FBI actually goes and arrests you and takes you into court. So, but
here's what I know.
James Comey should have been arrested.
If you get summoned, though, you show up at the court to be arraigned. The whole process, because when I turn myself into the FBI, that process takes an hour. I mean, they book you, they take your mugshot, they do everything, right? It's a whole process, just like President Trump went through. If you don't turn yourself in the FBI, you're just summons to court. Is Comey not going to go through the process at all with the FBI? And my point is, the night before with security, and I'm kind of shocked there's not any security outside of here. That was kind of the tell. I figured at about 20 after that you may not be seeing Comey walk in there. But in the choreograph between the lawyers negotiating and justice and the prosecutor, wouldn't it have come up that he wasn't going to turn himself into the FBI? He actually wasn't going to be arrested. He was just going to be arraigned. Wouldn't that have come up and somebody go, well, hang on, how is that happening? We definitely want him arrested because he's got to be all the paperwork and processing and fingerprinting and mugshots that the FBI do. It's not going to be done here, sir.
Well, so I don't want to rat out a source, but according to a very senior source at the Justice Department, and I'm going to let this source remain anonymous, this summons versus arrest warrant was discovered too late to do anything about it. So that's where we are.
Okay,
that's why we're not seeing a James Comey perp walk.
Okay. Walk us through then what happens. Comey's still there. I think he's already pled not guilty, so he must have exited the building through the I believe, through the Sally Port or where a car could pull in, but we'll stick around and see. To walk us through what happens after today. He's arraigned. What will have happened? They give him a preliminary day for some preliminary hearings, or what's the process from here?
Yeah, I mean, he can invoke the Speedy Trial Act and demand a trial very fast, within several months. This is not a complicated case. He might demand some discovery. I don't know what discovery he would be able to get. I mean, it's pretty clear cut. He testified in 2017 that he wasn't the source of leaks on the biggest scandal in American history. To my former boss, Chairman Chuck Grassley, he was under oath. He's lucky he didn't get charged with perjury. He got charged with false statements and obstruction of a congressional proceeding. And then when Ted Cruz asked him again in 2020, he reaffirms. He knew it was a lie. I mean, or the evidence is going to show he knew it was a lie. I think this is a slam dunk case. And if it were in a district where you actually had fair jurors, this would be a no-brainer. But I would not be surprised here in the Eastern District of Virginia if it's a hung jury or if James Comey walks. I mean, he shouldn't. It should be a slam dunk case. But we shall see. You're dealing with. Unfortunately, if you're in D.C. right across the Potomac River, you don't even get indicted. Judge Jeanine Pirro can't even get people indicted when they violently attack people. That's how out of whack D.C. is. Eastern District of Virginia is a little bit less crazy, but not much.
Halligan and Pam are doing yeoman's work, because I want to mention, you just gave the dates there. Correct me if I'm wrong. Back in, like today, we have Pam Bondi is the Attorney General of the United States, selected by the Chief Magistrate and Chief Law Enforcement Officer Donald J. Trump, who has the office of the president, and that's why he appointed her. Also, the FBI director is now Kash Patel instead of Christopher Wray. But back during this time, Christopher Wray was the head of the FBI. Bill Barr was the head of the Attorney General, and this all could have taken place in 2020. Could it have not? We had the FBI. Absolutely. We had all the information we need. Couldn't this have happened in President Trump's first term?
Absolutely. Chris Wray was President Trump's biggest mistake. And President Trump got forced to pick Chris Wray. I remember when I was the chief counsel for nominations on the Senate Judiciary Committee, my first day on the job was 2 days before Chris Wray's hearing. So I inherited Chris Wray's nomination. And I remember everyone was spun up. Even the Republicans were spun up saying Trump was colluding with the Russians. And I asked a simple question. This is after I rolled off my clerkship for Gorsuch to get him set up on the Supreme Court. I had to go back to Colorado, move my stuff across the country, and start my job. And I simply asked this question. I said, what did Trump collude to do? Like, what collude to do what? And people, like, they had people so spun up on the Senate Judiciary Committee, if you just asked that question, then you were a Russian asset, right? And then they were trying to pass the Mueller bill, where the president of the United States could not fire the FBI director. To McConnell's credit, he blocked that. McConnell did great things on judges. He did things that have angered us, but to his credit, he blocked that bill. But that's the mindset that even all the conservative Republicans had back in 2017 when Chris Wray got jammed down President Trump's throat after President Trump fired Comey. And so that's what we're up against. That's what we're up against with Chris Wray. He protected the deep state for years and years and years. And thank God we have Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche and Stanley Woodward as the number 3 and Kash Patel and Dan Bongino. Kash and Dan every day are just going through the FBI, going through back offices and vaults within vaults to find these documents. It's still whistleblowers, and we're not getting our hands on any documents. They're suppressing the documents. They said the other day. Dan Bongino says, I don't have control of this. The whistleblower came to him on the wiretapping of, as Senator Hawley calls it, the wiretapping of the senators. By the way, I think it's pretty evident Comey slipped out. He
He is looking for immediate dismissal of this, Mike Davis, on malicious prosecution. Your thoughts on that? That's one of the things he entered, and he slipped out. He slipped out through a under the cover of darkness. They allowed him to slip out. I don't think you're going to see Comey. That was Comey's family that left a few minutes ago that we followed. What about this countercharge he's making?
James Comey, the most malicious prosecutor in American history, is complaining about malicious prosecution. Remember what the Democrats said when we said there was malicious prosecution against President Trump? Well, they would say, well, the grand jury indicted. So even if the prosecutor was malicious, the grand jury of their peers is the one who brought the indictment and not the prosecutor. And so why doesn't that same argument apply here? Look, I would say to these lawfare Democrats, go to hell, right? You put Trump, his top aides like Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro and Jeff Clark and others, his supporters on January 6th were persecuted. You got parents, Christians. These lawfare Democrats put Republicans through hell. And they did it for 8 years, going back to Crossfire Hurricane. So these lawfare Democrats can go to hell. Justice is coming. Retribution is a crucial component of justice. It makes the victims whole. It serves as a powerful deterrent. James Comey can go to hell. And guess what? Even if this Eastern District of Virginia jury or this Democrat judge lets him skate, which could happen because you're not dealing with real Americans in real America, I want the process to be the punishment for this piece of garbage, James Comey.
Mike, real quickly on the journey, we're taking the first step today. I just want to give the audience a realistic, because I know everybody's very aggressive. People are working nonstop on this, but just give us your how does this roll out over the next couple of months in the best way that in your best thinking? How does this roll out?
Like I said, the special grand jury, it just got set up by the court in Fort Pierce, Florida, in the Southern District of Florida, the Fort Pierce Division. Judge Cannon is one of the judges there. Hopefully she will get this case because she's very familiar with this case from Jack Smith's case. And I think the grand jury will be up and running by January. And I hope, and I'm going to push very publicly, advocate very publicly that special grand jury in Fort Pierce takes all of these consolidated conspiracy cases against President Trump, his top aides, and his supporters, and justice will get delivered.
Mike Davis, the Viceroy, where do people go to Article 3? Now more than ever, you need to become part of the War Room Posse needs to become part of the Article 3 project. Where do folks go, sir?
I was going to say, Steve, if you thought I was a media whore before today, just wait. It's going to be, I'm going to make damn sure these people go to prison, and I'm going to do it very publicly. So Article3project.org, article number 3project.org. You can follow us on social media, donate, but only what you can afford, and take action. Action, as we always say, is the War Room Posse's superpower.
Mike Davis, the Viceroy, thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate you.
Thank you.